Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Allison. Uh, I'm Cathy Boyle from Autism Housing Pathways. Allison, I believe you gave the introduction for our other presentation,
You
but
know,
that's
that's what I was
okay.
thinking.
So tonight I'm going to be speaking about ways to apply for affordable and subsidized housing. And so without further ado, I will share my screen. And let's see. So, applying for housing for people with disabilities in Massachusetts. And we're going to start with a video. There's more to searching for housing than just Section 8. Subsidized and affordable housing comes in different flavors. With site-based housing, a subsidy is attached to an address. You apply to live at that address. With portable housing, a subsidy is attached to a person. You apply for a voucher you can use to rent a place that you find. Subsidized and affordable housing are funded in different ways. Housing can be federally funded. Housing can be state funded. Housing can be owned by private landlords who rent some units at a below market rate. Generally because they received tax credits. Let's start to put it together. We'll build a chart of affordable and subsidized housing options for people with disabilities in Massachusetts. State-based housing has the subsidy attached to an address. A portable voucher has a subsidy attached to a person. Housing can be federally funded. Housing can be state funded. Housing can be units set aside by a private landlord for people with lower incomes. If you've been on www.18section8.org, you're already familiar with the portable Section 8 voucher. It is funded by the federal government and travels with the person or household. There is also site-based Section 8. You apply to live at a specific address. It is a different waiting list than the portable Section 8 lists. Sometimes federal elderly housing has units set aside for younger adults with disabilities. This is on a property-by-property basis. A person with a disability can apply to live in federal family housing as a family of one. The Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, or MRVP, is a state-funded program. It can be used for specific locations. There is also an MRVP portable voucher. It travels with the person in the same way a portable Section 8 voucher does. In Massachusetts, 13.5% of all units in state elderly housing are set aside for adults with disabilities. A person with a disability can apply to live in state family housing as a family of one. The Alternative Housing Voucher Program is a portable voucher in Massachusetts just for adults with disabilities. Some units in private affordable housing are set aside for people with incomes at or below 30% or sometimes 50% of area median income. People who live in these units pay a percentage of their income in rent. Some units in private affordable housing are sometimes set aside for people with incomes at or below 50% and for people at or below 60% to 100% of area median income. People who live in these units pay a fixed amount in rent designed to be affordable to someone at that income level. A person living in one of these units may use a portable Section 8 voucher to help pay the rent in some circumstances. When you apply for more types of housing, you are likely to get housing faster. Want to learn how to apply for these housing options? Go to www.18section8.org and click on Other Ways to Apply for Housing. Okay, so as the video indicated, when you apply for more types of housing, you're likely to get housing faster. But there are literally over 5,000 housing lists in Massachusetts. So where do you apply? You need a strategy. We usually suggest starting with a basic list of applications. The idea is to, in a minute, maximize your chances of getting housing without turning applying into a full-time job. And that list comprises first a Section 8 portable voucher. And the two major lists have been the centralized waiting list and the EOHLC regional nonprofit list, formerly called the DHCD regional nonprofit list. With both lists, those vouchers can be used anywhere in the state. But the EOHLC list is currently closed. You can't get on it. You can continue to check at the link to see if it has reopened. Last week, I heard there is a chance it will reopen next year. Next, there is public housing through the Common Housing Application for Massachusetts Programs, or CHAMP application for site-based state-funded housing. Then there is the Alternative Housing Voucher Program portable voucher, which can be used anywhere in the state, but it must be used for a one-bedroom apartment unless a reasonable accommodation is needed. For example, a live-in aid or an additional room for medical equipment. And that's part of the CHAMP application. Next, there's the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program portable voucher, which can also be used anywhere in the state, and it also is part of the CHAMP application. And then 2 or 3 additional applications that might be appropriate to your situation. These might include site-based federal housing or private affordable housing. And a good way to identify these applications is by using a search engine, such as housingworks.net or housingnavigatorma.org. And then that's a rule of thumb. But before you actually apply, we want to personalize it. And so before finalizing your list, consider your person's situation and ask yourself these questions. Does my family member need to rent from family as a reasonable accommodation for disability? If so, a portable voucher may be the only option. Does my family member need a live-in aid? In that case, elderly housing is not a good bet, as most units in elderly housing have only one bedroom. Next, ask yourself, can my family member live alone, but needs prompting through the process of activities like showering and not just reminders? So, to recapitulate from our last meeting, a reminder is go take a shower. And they do it, and they do it adequately. A prompt is turn the water on, get your hair wet, get the shampoo. And if they need prompting, in that case, site-based housing might be a good idea as it permits mass health or common health members to use a drop-in service called group adult foster care. And then ask yourself, where does my family member live now? State and federal site-based housing lists use local preference. And your family member is unlikely to get in if they apply in a community they are not already living in or working in half time. If your goal is to live in a different community, private affordable housing may be the only site-based option. And there are some towns and organizations that have portable Section 8 applications that have different waiting lists than either the centralized waiting list or the EOHLC regional nonprofit list. And you want to see if some of them are appropriate for your family member. And you can learn more about those at the link. The big difference between those and the centralized waiting list and the EOHLC list is they're allowed to close. And they are also allowed to say you can't use the voucher outside of this community for the first 12 months. And then there are some additional questions that can't be answered until you've actually started filling out the CHAMP or using a search engine. And these are, am I comfortable with my family member living at a specific site or federal property? Some housing authorities will remove your name from all of that housing authority's lists if you turn down a unit when you reach the top. You need to take a look at the map or consider visiting the neighborhood and only apply for what you are willing to take. If you've already applied, don't worry too much. You can generally remove your name from the list for a specific location if you are not yet at the top. And are there MRVP site-based units in my family member's town? If so, consider applying. These units have local preference, so they stand a good chance of eventually getting one. And again, this is part of the CHAMP application. Whoops, wait a minute. Okay. When should you apply? Generally speaking, it can take anywhere from 3 to 12 years and depending on where you live, it could be as long as 20 years to get to the top of a housing list. If the goal is to have your family member living outside the family home by age 30, start getting lists on 18. They're not allowed to apply earlier than that. And as a rule of thumb, our timeline is apply for Section 8 at age 18. That's why we call our housing search website 18 Section 8. At 20 or 21, look at site-based Section 8, federal and state family housing, MRVP, private affordable housing. And by 22, you should be applying for everything, AHVP, elderly disabled housing. Now, please remember you don't have to be 22 to apply for any of these. The only reason to delay is if you are in a smaller town that has a shorter list for something and you apply at 18, there is a small risk they could get in before they turn 22. And that might be a problem if they're still at school. But certainly, if you're in a large community, go ahead and do it all at 18. So we have a housing search and application grid. I'm going to click onto it just to show it to you for a second, but then we are going to come back and talk about some other things first. I will say the grid corresponds to the chart we saw in the video. It is color coded and has links for portable Section 8, for the CHAMP application, including AHVP and MRVP vouchers, and for two search engines, housingworks.net and for housingnavigatorma.org. We will be using this grid as our roadmap for filling out applications. Okay, this is the old version of the chart, the non-accessible version. We'll be looking at the accessible version in just a moment in the slideshow. Before using the grid, we're going to talk about application tips and tricks. And these will help you fill out applications correctly, make sure they get to the right place, and help you keep your applications active. First, remember who is applying and who is going to be living there. Your family member with a disability is the head of household. They must be 18 or older to apply. Income refers to their income and no one else's. And that income includes income from all sources, a job, any government benefits, child support payments, gifts from family, any medical expenses the family pays for the person, etc. Assets, like income, refer to their assets and no one else's. And this includes all assets, bank accounts, stocks, bonds, including savings bonds, IRAs, etc. A vehicle only counts as theirs if their name is on the title. Now, I am trying to remember something. Okay. This is in my other presentation. It's not in this one, but this is very important, so I want to remember to mention it. There is a new rule coming down this year from the feds called HOTMA. HOTMA. I don't remember what it stands for. But what it says is that if the person has assets greater than $100,000, they are not eligible for federal housing assistance. But what matters is where the assets are. They don't count if they're in an ABLE account or a special needs trust or an IRA. Okay. Now they are a household of one, but they may need a two-bedroom unit if they need a live-in aid, but they are still a household of one. And the aid cannot be a close family member, or it will be a household of two, and the aid's income and assets will also be counted. Um, Again, they're a household of one. If there is a roommate, they are still a household of one if they are applying for a portable voucher. In site-based housing, you want to make sure they are the head of the household and not the roommate. And the reason for that is if they don't want to live together anymore, only the head of household gets to stay. Although even they may be required to move to a smaller unit unless they get another roommate fairly quickly. Now, there are some situations where your information may need to be substituted. Use your phone number and email address if your family member is not able or likely to respond to calls or emails. And similarly, use your address as the mailing address if the person does not live with you but is not able or likely to respond to correspondence in a timely manner. However, make sure your physical address, or sorry, not your physical address, their physical address, make sure their physical address is where they are, because it's their physical address that determines local preference for waiting lists. If you put down that their address is Framingham, but they're living in Needham, they're not going to get local preference in Needham. So you need to make sure the physical address is their address. The only exception to this is if their physical address is a school or a hospital and their legal address is still your address. Um, some applications, but not all, will ask for reasonable accommodations that are needed. And some examples of this are the housing authority should communicate with the guardian. Meetings with the housing authority and or the landlord need to be one-to-one with an advocate present. Explain the lease in simple language. The person needs a unit on a higher floor where it is quieter. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just examples. On some applications, longer, full applications, They may ask about medical expenses. And if they ask about medical expenses and the family is paying medical expenses for the person, include the amount paid under any questions about income as in-kind support, but also list it under medical expenses. They're going to cancel each other out, but they need to be listed in both places. And make sure the application is complete. On a paper application, either answer every question or write in A if the question does not apply. How do we get the application to the right place and make sure your family member gets onto the list? First, always make a copy for your own records before submitting a paper application and print a copy of any online application. If you are submitting an application and supporting documents in person, it is a good idea to ask for a written receipt. One easy way to do that is to bring your photocopy and ask them to timestamp it. If you're submitting it in person, ask the person taking the application to look it over for completeness. And it's a good idea to mail all correspondence, certified mail, and return receipt requested, so you have proof you mailed it and that it was received. What about written applications? You should write a letter annually to confirm that your family member is still on the waiting list. Make sure you make sure you use the exact name of the list in question. That's critical because many housing authorities administer more than one list, and you need to know which one your person is on. Any letter that you send should be signed by the person with the disability if they are able to sign it. Otherwise, you should include a copy of the guardianship letter. And all correspondence should be mailed certified mail, return receipt requested. For online applications, log in at least annually. Um, Actually, the Section 8 centralized waiting list requires you to log in every 90 days. And with that list, make sure you make a note of when they want you to next log in. Update information is needed. It is absolutely critical the physical address and the mailing address both be kept up to date. It's a good idea to keep a spreadsheet of every place your family member has applied and include the exact name of the waiting list, the date of the application, every date you've contacted the list either by mail or by logging in. We have a spreadsheet in our document library. We're going to take a look at it a little bit later. And when for all applications, when you are applying for site-based housing through a housing authority, make sure you regularly review where the person is applying and remove any locations they are not willing to accept. Otherwise, if they reach the top of a list and turn down a location, they might be removed from all waiting lists maintained by that housing authority. Okay, When your person is nearing the top of the list, they're going to contact you. They're going to want you to update the application, supply additional information, and provide documentation. Up until now, they have not asked you for proof. Now they will. Never miss a deadline or a meeting. Yes, they absolutely will schedule a meeting saying you must attend without ever consulting with you about the date. And if you cannot make it to a meeting, make sure you contact them ahead of time to reschedule. Because there's always someone in line behind you willing to take your spot. And a good thing to be aware of is that when housing authorities send out these packets, they don't send out just one. They send out packets to a group of people who are near the top of the list. And if you are the person who gets your packet in complete and on time, it may move you up. Okay, so here is our grid, and you can see the similarities to the chart we constructed in the video. And on our top left, we have the site-based subsidy, I'm sorry, the site-based units where the subsidy is attached to an address. And again, it's federally funded, state funded, or privately funded. In our second row, we've got the subsidy that is attached to the person in the form of a portable voucher. And that includes federal and that includes state. Now, what we have here is a color coding system. And so our yellow is for the portable Section 8, which is the federal portable voucher. Blue is everything through the Common Housing Application for Massachusetts programs. And purple is everything else, and you search using a search engine such as Housing Navigator and Housing Navigator Massachusetts and Housing Works. So, in other words, basically, we're saying do the gold, do the blue, do 2 or 3 from the purple. Um, Okay, what I just said, your basic list is the Section 8 portable, which is the gold, the CHAMP or blue for state-funded programs, including public housing, the AHV portable voucher, where you should apply to all participating communities, MRVP, where you should apply for all portable vouchers, and the site-based only if your community has it, and then 2 or 3 others using a search engine like Housing Navigator, MA, or Housing Works, again, the purple. And it's a good idea to use a checklist to personalize it. The detailed directions for each type are at www.18section8.org. Click on other ways to apply for housing. We're going to be looking at all of this in a minute. Track your applications using a spreadsheet. Again, the checklist and the spreadsheet are in the document library on the website. A couple of things to remember. Local housing authorities are like fast food menus or fast food restaurants. They have a lot of different items on the menu. If you tell me you applied at the housing authority, it doesn't tell me what you applied for. It's like saying, I ate lunch at Wendy's. I can't tell if you had the salad or the French fries. You need to know if you had the salad or the French fries. So, did you apply for portable Section 8? Did you apply for site-based state elderly disabled? Did you apply for the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program? You need to know the exact name of each program you've applied for. That's why the spreadsheet is so important. In general, housing programs are based on income. They are not based on the presence of a disability. There are some housing programs that require the presence of a disability, but not a specific diagnosis. And in fact, they're prohibited from asking what the diagnosis is under the Fair Housing Act. Generally, receiving supplemental security income, SSI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, is enough evidence, or a healthcare professional may be asked to confirm the person has a disability by filling out a form. Now, before we go, oh, wait, one more slide here. Supportive services are generally separate from affordable housing. For example, a housing program that allows a live-in aid does not specify whether that means an adult foster care provider, a Department of Developmental Services shared living provider, or an unofficial assistant like a roommate or a cousin who only moved in to help out. And in fact, housing authority personnel may be completely unfamiliar with what those programs are. But it's on you to make certain that the rules of the services you're planning on using are consistent with the rules of the housing situation. So, for example, a close family member can't be a live-in aid, or their income will be considered in determining rent and eligibility by the housing program. However, the adult family care program requires the caregiver to live in the same legal unit. As a result, you're going to have to use adult foster care rather than adult family care. Okay, so where do we go to learn more? For assistance in completing applications, go to 18section8.org and refer to slides 37 to 39 of this presentation. And just to recapitulate, I'm going to show you slides 37 to 39. 37, 38, 39. Okay, okay. Now, to learn more about how housing interacts with services, we have our Turning 18 checklist. We have housing in a month's worth of tweets. We have an infographic of housing models and supportive services. We have our other presentation, Thinking About Housing, and additional resources on our main website, www.autismhousingpathways.org. We have a glossary of terms, which I'm not going to read, but I know Allison is going to send out the slides. And now what I would like to do is get out of the presentation and go to the website. Boy, do I have a lot open. All right. Oops, wrong website. Okay. This is 18 section 8. And you can see that we have a lot here. When this website was first created, it was only for section 8. And then about 8 years ago, we got a grant to expand it to other ways to apply for housing. And you can see we've got something right here called Other Ways to Apply for Housing. And if I start clicking on these, you're going to see that it looks very familiar because guess what? All the slides you just saw are lifted straight from the website. This entire evening is an exercise in getting you to look at the website. So we have our overview of housing types. There's the video. We've got our strategy. We've got, use your checklist, use your spreadsheet. What are the questions you ask? It's all the same stuff that was in the presentation I just gave. And again, you can see it walks you through it one step at a time. We've got the application tips and tricks. Filling it out, making sure your person stays on the list, all the same things. But then what the website does is it starts to walk you through step by step. How do I apply for Section 8? How do I apply for the CHAMP? How do I use a search engine? And we have links to the applications here, and we also have pictures. So to give an example, let's go to the CHAMP. You can see it corresponds to the blue section of the housing search and application grid. You can see what it covers. And then we have step-by-step directions on how to apply online and also how to apply on paper. Um, Again, we have pictures, how to do all of it. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'm going to go up to the document library that I've referred to many times this evening. It's kind of your Operation Central. So in the document library, here's a copy of the presentation that I just gave at the first link. The video is at the second link. We have the grid here. We have our strategy. Now, here we have the checklist, which I've talked about repeatedly. And you can see these are the same questions we talked about in the presentation. Does my person need to rent from family? Do they need a live-in aid? Do they need drop-in services? And you can see it tells you what does it make sense for them to apply for. And we have an explanation of what the acronyms are. Now, if we go back, we can see our spreadsheet. And again, you can put in the title of any application you did, what kind of application it was. For example, is it a Section 8 portable? Where did you mail it to if it's a paper application? What date did you apply? And anytime you did anything connected to it. When did you update? When did you change the address? When did you request status, etc.? And so best practice is you take this and you print it out and you paper clip it to the inside front cover of a folder, and you keep copies of all of your applications and any correspondence in there. And as a final note, I just want to call everybody's attention to the fact that the site is translatable and that we've got not full translations on everything, but we generally have subtitled video and transcripts for our video and for our presentations. We do have completely translated materials for Spanish. Okay, so I'm going to stop the screen share now and open us up for questions. Okay. All right, the first question is, hello, I have problems. I want help now. I'm a resident at Framingham Housing on the second floor, and I have my son. He has autism, and this place, um, is it safe or is it not safe? I'm a little confused by your question. Um, I brought a letter from his doctor and I gave it to the housing authority. My aim is to move to the first floor, more safe, but they told us you should wait around 8 years and my son is now 12. Okay, unsafe. Um, Generally speaking, with housing authorities, what they tell you when you talk to them in person or on the phone is different from what you get if you put it in writing. So I understand that the housing authority is saying you will have more flexibility if you have a portable voucher, but you have an immediate problem. So I would write a letter or an email to the housing authority that just says, I am requesting a move to a first floor unit as a reasonable accommodation for disability. Leave it at that. They should send you a form to fill out. And you're going to fill out the form, and part of that form will be a request to tell them the name of the doctor. And then they will send another form to the doctor. And the doctor should attach a letter. Now, if you did all of that and they are still rejecting it, you should look into an appeal. But make sure everything is in writing and using any forms they have. And as I said, you may have to appeal it. And if that doesn't work, you may have to go to, if it's state funded housing, you may have to go to EOHLC. If it's federal housing, you may have to go to the HUD field office. Worst case scenario is getting a lawyer involved. Other questions?
Oh, I see Christy has her hand up.
Go ahead, Christy.
Just waiting for spotlight.
Go ahead, Christy. Oh,
Yes, hi. So I have two quick questions actually. So on the PowerPoint, we talked about the waiting list for housing could be between 3 to 12 years, but I have a friend who has been waiting over 15 years. So that's a quick question to ask about why that difference might be there.
okay.
Also, if talking about a child with autism who also has seizures, are they allowed at some of these places where landlords allow
A service dog.
a service dog? Is that something that they could have at some of these places? So those are my two questions.
Okay. Um, First, how long the waiting list is depends on where you live. So, for example, the centralized waiting list, anybody can get on it, but only 103 housing authorities participate, and they all prioritize local residents. So if you're not a local resident, you could stay on that list forever and never get a voucher. And most people don't know that. That's why it's important to apply to more than one list. So that's number one. Number two, even if you live in a town that participates, how long the list is a function of how many people are on it who live in the community and how many vouchers the community has. So, for example, if you live someplace like Quincy that has a large population and a lot of people who income qualify for Section 8, their list is very long. But if you live in a place like Concord, where very few people income qualify, and they are mostly adults with disabilities, the list can be very short. So it really is a function of where you live. Um,
Got it. Okay. That's
okay.
really
And
helpful. Thank you.
yeah, and my advice to people is always, if you're going to move to a town on the centralized waiting list. Because when you update your address on the list after you move, you get credit for the time you've been on the list. Now, the next question was the service dog. And yes, the answer is yes. It is similar to the situation we talked about earlier, where you write the letter, or rather, you start by sending the email requesting the reasonable accommodation, and then they're going to send the form. The thing you have to be a little careful about is whether it's a service dog, a therapy dog, or an emotional support dog, because the law guarantees some kinds of animals, but not others.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your answers.
Other, okay, wait a minute. I think there's a question in the chat. If someone is currently in a site-based housing situation, can they be on the federal Section 8 or the federal centralized Section 8 wait list in hopes of eventually getting a mobile voucher? Yes, absolutely. It's important to understand that what you do at first is not necessarily what you do forever. You ought to think about housing waiting lists as you're at the grocery store and you can't tell which checkout line is moving fastest. So you get in one line, you put your husband in another line, you put your kid in another line, and you see which line moves fastest. And assuming that you only applied to things you're willing to take, you take what comes up first, but you stay on the list for the things you want more. And when you get to the top of what you want the most, you take it. One other thing, if you are in site-based Section 8 housing, so in other words, not a portable Section 8 voucher, but in a Section 8 apartment, once you've lived there for 12 months, you can petition the housing authority to convert your site-based subsidy into a portable voucher. They don't have to honor it immediately. It could be a function of their budget, but it's worth looking into. Now, this only applies to site-based subsidy through Section 8. not through any of the state-based programs. Any other questions? I'm trying to be mindful of time. Somebody said, how long was that? How long was what? Oh, site-based to portable, 12 months. Christie's hand is up.
I didn't know if it was up from before, but I think,
Nope, that was from before. Sorry about
that's what I thought. It's okay.
that.
Okay.
I would just like to say something that might help folks. This is Allison. My son was on the waiting list for 10 years exactly. So we applied when he was 18 and he got the voucher when he was 28. And we live in Framingham. Just want to share that.
And I want to add that it is very important to apply for these lists, even if you think your child can't live alone. There are many ways to use a voucher. My son lives in a group home and he has a voucher. There are people who have a family member take the voucher and rent a guest room from a family friend. It's possible to convert your garage into a studio apartment. That's legal now. And have your family member rent from you. You can't be their adult family care provider, but if they qualify for PCA, you can be their PCA.
There's one more question.
Okay, one more question. I applied for Section 8 in 2019. Both my son and I have autism, and we live on a very low income. Despite submitting a request for reasonable accommodation and having documented disabilities, I've not received any updates or letters regarding my application. I would appreciate any information or assistance you can provide. Okay, first of all, over 90% of housing authorities with portable Section 8 vouchers have no preference for disability, unfortunately. And over 40% of the heads of household on the centralized waiting list have a disability. Having said that, the state-funded programs do have a preference for disability. And so it's very important to make sure that you have applied to the state-funded programs, not just Section 8.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Rain. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. We will be sending out the slide deck to all of you that attended this evening. And I hope you all have a great rest of your night. Thank you.
Thank you.